On Christmas Eve, my son invited me to an expensive steakhouse and smiled. Dad, tonight is all about family. I believed him until the check arrived. My daughter-in-law pointed at me and told the waiter separate checks. We're not paying for him. My son looked straight at me and silently nodded. I didn't argue. I quietly finished my soup. Then the restaurant manager walked over, looked at them and said one sentence that turned both of their faces completely pale. Because I'd been expecting this moment for 21 days. This story starts quietly, but it carries weight. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell me, have you ever had to make a choice between family loyalty and standing up for yourself? Your voice here truly matters. A quick note. Certain details have been adjusted for storytelling purposes, but the heart of the message is what I hope stays with you. I stood in the bedroom holding the navy vest between my hands, running my thumb across the brass buttons one last time. The fabric still carried a faint trace of cedar from Lillian's closet, even though she'd been gone 12 years. She bought this for me on our 48th anniversary the year before the cancer. I hadn't worn it since her funeral. The envelope sat on the dresser where I'd placed it 3 weeks ago. $1,000 in 50s. My last money. My phone buzzed. I knew who it was before I looked. Dad. Desmond's voice had that careful brightness he used with difficult clients. My son Desmond Prescott, 45 years old, CEO of Prescott and Vale. Properties the largest residential real estate firm in the Denver metro area. I wanted to invite you to dinner tonight, Christmas Eve. The whole family will be there. I kept my voice steady. Larimer Steakhouse. You know the place on Colfax. We have a reservation at 6:30. I did know it. I'd driven past it 100 times back when I still had the truck, before they sold it in November without asking. That's nice of you, son. He paused. We have something we want to discuss with you. About your future. Making sure you're taken care of. Taken care of. Like I was a problem to be solved. Like I hadn't spent 43 years as a civil engineer calculating load-bearing structures while they were still in diapers. I'll be there, I said. Great. Do you need a ride? I can send someone to... I'll manage. I ended the call and picked up the envelope. The weight of it felt final. The number 16 bus ran down Colfax every 30 minutes. I caught the 5 o'clock sitting in the back where the seat springs were shot. A woman with grocery bags sat across from me, and a teenager with headphones leaking tinny music slumped near the front. I was Warren Prescott, 72 years old, retired civil engineer, former owner of Prescott Consulting, reduced to counting bus stops like a man counting down to something. Because I was? I got off at the Larimer stop at 5:28. The restaurant parking lot was mostly empty too early for the dinner rush. The December wind cut through my coat, but I'd left the navy vest at home. I'd need it later, for the actual dinner. Gordon Whitfield stood near the kitchen entrance smoking a cigarette. He was exactly where I'd hoped he'd be. I'd called ahead. He looked up as I approached. Mid-50s weathered face, the careful posture of a man who'd spent 30 years managing people. Mr. Prescott. That's right. He dropped the cigarette and ground it out with his heel. You said on the phone you had a special request. I pulled the envelope from my coat pocket. My family's coming here tonight. 6:30 reservation under Desmond Prescott. I want to pay for the dinner in advance. Gordon's eyes flicked to the envelope, then back to my face. In this business, you learn to read people quickly. That's not usually how we... Something shifted in his expression. He took the envelope, weighing it in his palm without opening it. Mr. Prescott, if you don't mind me asking... It's the last dinner I'll have with him, I said. It wasn't quite a lie. Gordon was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. He had good hands, steady scarred from kitchen work, but when he looked at mine, I saw a recognition. My hands were different. Decades of drafting work and structural calculations had left them precise. The fingers still straight, even at 72? Engineer's hands. You built something, Gordon said quietly, and someone's trying to take it. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. He slipped the envelope into his jacket. I'll take care of it. The best table. Everything perfect. Thank you. He turned toward the kitchen door, then paused. Mr. Prescott, whatever you're planning, be careful. I'm always careful, I said. I'm an engineer. I held his gaze for a moment. When the bill comes tonight, I want you to announce it in front of the room. Exactly as it happened. No quiet side conversations. Gordon studied me for 3 seconds. Then he nodded. Gordon went inside. I stood alone in the parking lot as the wind picked up, carrying the smell of snow that hadn't fallen yet. The trap was set. I discovered the Zillow listing 3 weeks ago, my own house, the one Lillian and I bought in 1978, listed for sale at $870,000, without my signature, without my knowledge. I'd seen Desmond's company name on the listing. I'd seen Margot's name as co-agent. I checked my watch. 6 hours until dinner. 6 hours until I sat down at that table, smiled at my grandchildren, and showed them exactly what happens when you try to steal from a man who spent his entire life building things that don't fall down. I had been planning this for 21 days. Every calculation checked. Every variable accounted for. The hardest part wasn't the anger it was keeping my hands from shaking when I held that envelope, my last $1,000. But some foundations require sacrifice. The bus wouldn't come for another 40 minutes. I pulled my coat tighter and started walking toward the bench on Colfax. The December sky was turning that particular shade of gray that promised snow by midnight. I thought about the navy vest waiting at home. I thought about Lillian's hands on those brass buttons, 48 years of marriage in her smile when she'd given it to me. And I thought about what she would say if she could see what our children had become. The wind picked up. I sat down to wait. They arrived in a car worth more than I'd spent in the last 5 years, and the first thing I noticed was the watch on Celeste's wrist catching the lobby lights. The white Porsche Cayenne pulled up to the valet stand at exactly 8 o'clock. I'd been sitting in the lobby for 20 minutes, watching families come and go, listening to Dean Martin through the sound system. My navy vest felt tight across my chest. Desmond stepped out first. Tailored charcoal suit, Italian leather shoes, hair styled with expensive product. He handed the keys to a teenage valet, then turned to help his wife from the passenger side. Celeste Prescott, 42 years old, emerged in a red evening gown that hugged her frame like architectural precision heels, sharp enough to puncture concrete. My daughter-in-law, former marketing executive, current lifestyle influencer, that's what Desmond called it when I'd asked what she did all day. Her blonde hair was pulled back, exposing her neck, her ears, and the glint of something gold on her left wrist. The watch. I couldn't see it clearly yet, but it caught the chandelier light as she moved, and something in my chest tightened. Desmond saw me, and his face arranged itself into warmth. "Dad!" He crossed the lobby in long strides, arms open, and pulled me in a hug that smelled like bergamot and cedar. First time he'd touched me in 8 months. "You look great. Merry Christmas. Thanks for coming." "Merry Christmas," I said. Celeste air-kissed my cheek, her perfume sharp and floral. "So good to see you. That vest vintage, right charming." "Your mother picked it out," I said. Something flickered across her face. Well, she had wonderful taste. The hostess led us to a corner table with a view of the Christmas tree 12 feet tall, decorated in gold and silver. Gordon had kept his word. Best table in the house. White tablecloth, crystal stemware candles already lit. Desmond pulled out Celeste's chair. She sat with practiced grace, and the watch slid down her wrist as she adjusted her napkin. Still couldn't see it clearly, just the glint. "This is perfect," Desmond said, settling across from me. "I'm glad we could do this, Dad. It's been too long." "It has," I agreed. The waiter appeared, young man, bow tie, precisely knotted. He handed us menus bound in heavy leather with gold embossing. I opened mine and scanned the prices. Appetizers ranged from $38 to $65. Entrees started at $75 and climbed to $250. Celeste didn't even look at the prices. "The Wagyu medium rare," she told the waiter. "And king crab, how fresh is today's catch. Arrived this morning from Alaska, ma'am." "Perfect, and we'll start with the lobster bisque." She glanced at Desmond. "Champagne," Bollinger, Desmond said. "The Grande Année, if you have it." The waiter nodded. "Excellent choice, sir." Desmond turned to his menu. "Lamb chops for me, and we'll do the full dessert tasting. Might as well celebrate." Celebrate. The word hung in the air like smoke. The waiter turned to me, pen poised. I looked down at my menu one more time. Turkey soup, $18. The cheapest item on the entire menu. "Turkey soup," I said, "and coffee black." The waiter's eyes flickered just for a second, something that might have been pity as he wrote it down. Celeste was already talking about champagne vintages. Nobody noticed. How do you calculate the cost of a meal when your son orders more in appetizers than you have left in the world? You don't. You sit there in your dead wife's vest and you watch them spend money like water while you've been rationing instant coffee for 3 months. You watch and you wait and you remember that the envelope in your pocket bought this performance. The champagne arrived in a silver bucket. Desmond made a show of tasting it, nodding his approval. The waiter poured 3 flutes. I didn't touch mine. So, Dad, Desmond said, leaning back with the ease of a man who'd never worried about money, we wanted to talk to you about some things, your living situation, making sure you're comfortable. I'm comfortable, I said. Celeste reached for the breadbasket and the watch slid down her wrist again. The candlelight caught it differently this time, warmer, more direct. I saw the face clearly for the first time. Gold, round, simple design, and there on the lower left corner of the crystal danced a tiny triangular scratch. My breath stopped. I knew that scratch. I had looked at it thousands of times over 31 years. Lillian caught the watch on a car door handle in 1998, coming out of the grocery store with bags in both arms. The scratch was small enough that the jeweler said it wasn't worth repairing, and she'd laughed and said it gave the watch character. She wore it every day until the cancer took her, and when she died, Desmond had sworn on her memory that he couldn't find the watch. We'd looked everywhere. He said it must have been lost during one of her hospital stays. I'd wanted to bury her with it. This vintage piece is getting so much attention on Instagram, Celeste was saying to Desmond, turning her wrist to admire it. People love authenticity. Authenticity. My wife wore that watch every day for 31 years, and my son sold it like scrap metal. I set my water glass down carefully. My hands wanted to shake. I pressed my palms flat against the tablecloth, feeling the starched linen counting to 5 the way I used to before presenting structural calculations to clients who wouldn't understand the mathematics. Where did you get that watch? My voice came out quieter than I'd intended. Celeste looked up surprised. It's vintage. Desmond found it for our anniversary. Isn't it gorgeous? Found it, I repeated. Estate sale, Desmond said smoothly, not meeting my eyes. Thought Celeste would appreciate something with history. History. The soup arrived. Steam rose from the bowl, carrying the scent of turkey and sage and rosemary. I picked up my spoon, then set it down. My hands were shaking now, just slightly, the tremor an engineer recognizes as structural instability. I reached for my coffee cup instead, gripping it with both hands, letting the ceramic heat burn against my palms. Across the table, Desmond was laughing at something on his phone. Celeste was adjusting the watch on her wrist, making sure it caught the light. I thought about the envelope I'd given Gordon, my last $1,000. I thought about the plan I'd been building for 21 days, every calculation checked, every variable accounted for. And I thought about how my son had just looked me in the eye and lied about his mother's watch. Celeste's lobster bisque arrived in a white porcelain bowl, steam rising, and before the waiter could step away, she was already talking about their new villa in Aspen. The property closed at 4.2, she said, spoon hovering over the bowl. Can you believe it? 10,000 square feet, ski in, ski out, access, infinity pool overlooking the valley. Desmond nodded along. We're thinking February in the Maldives before the Bentley arrives in March. The flying spur fully customized. My soup had gone cold. I hadn't touched it since the moment I'd seen the watch. That's wonderful, I said, keeping my voice level. You've done well for yourselves. Desmond's worked so hard, Celeste said, finally tasting her bisque. Oh, this is divine. You should try yours, Warren. She used my first name like we were friends, like she hadn't stolen my wife's watch, like her husband hadn't lied to my face about it. $4.2 million. I did the math automatically, 43 years of calculating structural loads. The Aspen Villa alone was 4.2. Add the Bentley, probably 300,000 for a customized flying spur. The Maldives vacation, at least 50,000. Nearly $5 million in spending just this year. In 2005, sitting at our kitchen table with Lillian's hand on mine, I'd signed over $3.5 million. Every cent from selling my consulting firm. Everything we'd saved. Desmond had needed it for his real estate business, he'd said. Seed capital. A father's investment in his son's future. The numbers didn't work. Even if he'd doubled that money and the 2008 crash had hit real estate hard, he couldn't have turned 3.5 into the kind of wealth that bought $4 million vacation homes. Not honestly. The Aspen place has 6 bedrooms. Celeste continued her watch, catching the candlelight as she gestured. We're thinking of it as our winter house. Summer's in the Hamptons, but we're looking at Napa too. Winter house, summer house, wine country. I picked up my coffee cup. It had gone lukewarm. You'll have to come visit, Desmond said, though his eyes didn't meet mine. When we get settled in. I'd like that I lied. Celeste leaned forward, lowering her voice. Between you and me, Warren Desmond almost didn't pull the trigger on Aspen. He kept saying we should be conservative. But I told him you don't get to this level of success by playing small. You have to take what you deserve. Take what you deserve. I thought about that kitchen table in 2005, Lillian's hand on mine. Her voice gentle as she said it was Desmond's future, that fathers were supposed to help their children. And I wondered if she'd have signed those papers, if she'd known her watch would end up on Celeste's wrist, her memory reduced to Instagram content about authenticity. Excuse me? Desmond's phone had buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his face changed something, tightening around his eyes, his jaw going rigid. He stood abruptly. Sorry, I need to take this. Work thing. He walked quickly toward the exit phone, already pressed to his ear. I watched him through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Snow had started falling, light flakes catching the parking lot lights. Desmond paced in tight circles, his free hand rubbing the back of his neck. I knew that gesture. 30 years working with contractors taught you to read body language. When projects went over budget, when costs spiked, when deadlines couldn't be met, men rubbed their necks like that. Financial panic had a physical signature. He's always working, Celeste said beside me, her voice carrying practiced weariness. Even on Christmas Eve, that's what success costs. But she didn't look worried. She took another spoonful of bisque, checked her phone, adjusted the watch on her wrist. No surprise, no concern. She already knew about the call. Through the window, I watched Desmond's mouth moving. The glass muffled most of it, but I heard fragments when he turned toward the building. Tomorrow morning, and key closing on schedule, and won't be a problem. Tomorrow morning. The words hit me like a physical blow. 3 weeks ago, I'd been on my laptop trying to figure out why my property tax bill had come to someone else's attention. I'd found my own house, the one Lillian and I bought in 1978, the one where we'd raised our children, the one where I still lived, listed on Zillow. $890,000. Closing scheduled for December 25th at 9 a.m. Christmas morning. Desmond's company logo on the listing, Margot's name as co-agent, my daughter and my son selling my home while I still slept in it. And they'd invited me to dinner tonight, so I wouldn't be home tomorrow when they sold it. Is your soup all right? Celeste was looking at me with polite concern. You haven't touched it. It's fine, I said. Desmond came back through the door, brushing snow from his shoulders. His face was pale, a thin sheen of sweat, visible despite the December cold. He sat down heavily, not meeting anyone's eyes. Celeste reached across the table and touched his hand. Just a brief contact, fingers squeezing once. Silent communication. Reassurance. A plan in motion. I looked at her wrist, at my wife's stolen watch, with its tiny triangular scratch, and thought about the screenshot saved on my laptop. My own house. $890,000. Closing December the 25th at 9 a.m. Tomorrow morning. Everything okay? I asked Desmond. He picked up his champagne flute, drained half of it. Fine. Just a client. They always call at the worst times. Another lie. His third tonight, if I was counting. Fourth, if I included the estate sale story about the watch. I picked up my soup spoon. My hand was steady now. The shaking had stopped somewhere between watching Desmond panic in the snow and understanding exactly what they'd planned. They'd invited me to Christmas Eve dinner, so I'd be out of my house when they stole it. But I'd given Gordon that envelope 3 hours ago. I'd set my own trap 21 days earlier. And I'd come to this table knowing everything they thought I didn't know. The waiter appeared to clear our appetizer dishes. Desmond's tartare sat untouched. My soup had gone cold. Only Celeste had finished her meal. Ready for the main course? The waiter asked. I looked at my son, at his wife, at the watch on her wrist. Absolutely, I said. Summer of 2005, and Lillian's hand covered mine across the kitchen table. The notary documents still warm from the printer, and she said the words that would seal our fate. It's his future. Warren, give him everything. I could still see it. Late July evening, cicadas screaming outside the open window, the smell of her coffee going cold in the mug beside the papers. Sale documents for Prescott Consulting. 43 years of my work reduced to numbers on a page. $4.1 million gross. After federal and state taxes, $3.5 million remained. Desmond sat across from us, 25 years old, fresh business degree from Boulder Eyes, bright with the kind of confidence I'd never had at his age. He'd already incorporated his real estate firm. He just needed capital. "He's ready, Warren," Lillian said, her thumb tracing circles on the back of my hand. "Your firm built bridges. Now build his future. Give him the foundation we never had." I'd wanted to keep some of it. Retirement fund. Safety net. But Lillian had always been the one with faith. Faith in God. Faith in family. Faith in our son. "I promise, Dad," Desmond said, leaning forward earnest. "I'll make you proud. I'll build something great with this." I signed. Every cent. Kept only enough for 2 years of property taxes and the old truck. Lillian smiled like I'd given her a gift instead of emptying our future. "Your mother and I believe in you," I said. 20 years later, sitting at a steakhouse table, watching my son lie about his mother's watch, that moment felt like it belonged to different people. Strangers I used to know. The memory dissolved, replaced by fluorescent lights and the antiseptic smell of medical offices. September 14th, 2025. Dr. Helen Brennan's voice was kind, but clinical, the way doctors learn to deliver bad news. Gentle directness honed over 1,000 difficult conversations. She was a thoracic oncologist in her 50s, silver streaks in her dark hair, reading glasses perched on papers that held my future in black ink. "Stage 2 is very treatable, Mr. Prescott," she said, her hands folded on the desk between us. "We'd start radiation within 2 weeks. Total out-of-pocket after Medicare would be around $34,000. $34,000, I repeated. The number hung in the air like smoke. I did the math automatically. 34,000 equaled 3 years of property taxes on the Lakewood house, the house where Lillian had planted rosemary in the backyard in 1982, the house where we'd raised 2 children, the house where she'd died in our bedroom with morning light coming through the curtains she'd sewn herself. "I know it's significant," Dr. Brennan continued. "We have payment plans, financial counseling—" "Thank you, doctor," I said, standing. "I'll think about it." I never went back. I chose my house over my life because Lillian died in that house, and Desmond was selling the place where his mother took her last breath. I folded the diagnosis paper and put it in my vest pocket. The same navy vest I was wearing tonight, the brass buttons catching candlelight, while my son and his wife planned my erasure. The third memory came sharper, more recent, still raw. December 3rd, 2025. 3 weeks ago. Living room in the Lakewood house, laptop on my knees, searching for property tax payment information. Typed my address into Google out of habit. The Zillow listing appeared like a punch to the gut. My address, my house, $890,000. Photos of the front porch, the garage, the backyard. I stared at that backyard photo for 5 full minutes before I understood what I was seeing. The fence, the one I'd built in 1987 when Margot was learning to ride a bike and we needed to keep her safe. 6 feet tall, cedared planks, still standing strong after 38 years. The photo showed the entire yard from an elevated angle taken from inside the fence line, not from the alley. Someone had trespassed. Someone had walked through my gate, stood in my yard, and photographed my property like it already belonged to them. Listing agent Brad Sterling. I knew that name. I'd met Brad Sterling at Desmond's office party in August. Slick suit, practiced handshake, the kind of smile that sold houses to people who couldn't afford them. He'd asked about my home, how long I'd owned it, what the neighborhood was like, if I'd ever considered downsizing. I'd thought he was making conversation. He'd been planning. Scheduled closing December 25th, 2025. 9 a.m. Christmas morning. I sat frozen for 20 minutes, the laptop screen burning my eyes, my breath coming shallow and fast the way it hadn't since Lillian's funeral. Then I picked up the phone and called Larimer Steakhouse. Christmas Eve, 8 o'clock, I told the hostess. Table for 3. My son and his wife are treating me to dinner. That was the moment I stopped being a victim and became an engineer. Again, I would build one final structure, a trap. 3 weeks of preparation, gathering documents, the original 2005 transfer agreement, the property deed with my name, not Desmond's, screenshots of the Zillow, listing time-stamped and saved, the envelope with $1,000, my last money, but engineers understand that foundations require sacrifice. I called Gordon Whitfield the next day, made arrangements, set the stage, and I waited. I blinked, and I was back at the table. Desmond was studying his phone thumb, scrolling his jaw still tight from the call he'd taken outside. Celeste's fingers drummed against the white tablecloth, her nails painted the same red as her dress. Lillian's watch caught the candlelight, the tiny triangular scratch, visible even from across the table. 3 memories burning in my chest like coals. The money I gave, $3.5 million, every cent Lillian and I had saved handed to our son, because my wife believed in him more than I believed in myself. The cancer I hid, stage 2. Treatable $34,000 I didn't have because I'd given everything to the son who was now selling my house. The house they stole listed without my knowledge, photographed without my permission, scheduled to close tomorrow morning, while they kept me distracted at this table. My vest pocket held the weight of the envelope. Not the one with money I'd given that to Gordon hours ago. This one held something more valuable. Proof. Every document. Every screenshot. Every piece of evidence that would make them answer for what they'd done. The waiter appeared at my elbow. "Main courses will be right out, gentlemen, ma'am." Desmond didn't look up from his phone. Celeste adjusted her watch. And I sat there, a dying man at a table he'd paid for with his last money, watching his children celebrate their betrayal. But soon, the waiter set down 3 plates. Celeste's $220 Wagyu, still sizzling on cast-iron Desmond's lamb chops, glistening with rosemary butter, and my $18 bowl of turkey soup. And Celeste glanced at the parking lot through the window and asked, "Did you drive here tonight?" "Dad." I looked up from my soup. Steam rose from the surface, carrying the smell of sage and thyme. "Why do you ask?" "I didn't see your truck in the lot," she said, cutting into the Wagyu with surgical precision. Blood pooled on the white plate. "The old F-15, oh right." Desmond looked up from his lamb chops fork paused. "I sold it," I said. "November, got $8,400 for it, bought the kids Christmas presents, paid some bills." The words hung in the air for exactly 3 seconds. Then Celeste took a bite of Wagyu, her eyes closing briefly. "Oh my God, this is incredible. Desmond, you have to try this." No follow-up question. No surprise that I'd sold my only vehicle. No curiosity about how I'd gotten here without a car. No interest in what gifts I'd bought their children, my grandchildren, whom I hadn't seen in 8 months. Desmond returned to his lamb chops. "Good for you, Dad. Those old trucks just become money pits." Money pits. My 2004 Ford F-150 had 238,000 miles on it. I changed the oil myself every 5,000 miles for 18 years. Rust had eaten the wheel wells the transmission ground when shifting, but it ran. I'd sold it to a mechanic named Torres for $8,400 cash. $600 went to Christmas presents, a science kit for Emma 8, who wanted to be an astronomer, a bicycle for Noah. 6, I'd wrapped them myself, left them on Margot's porch. Never got a thank you text. The rest went to property taxes, 3 years behind. And tonight, I'd taken the number 16 bus down Colfax at 5 o'clock, walked the last 2 blocks through falling snow. Neither of them had asked how I'd arrived. The Bentley configurator finally updated, Celeste said to Desmond, pulling out her phone. March delivery confirmed. Flying spur in storm gray. Desmond leaned over to look. Perfect. That'll be here right after Maldives. How do you calculate the value of a truck 18 years old? Rusted wheel wells, grinding transmission against your grandchildren's faces on Christmas morning, even if you won't be there to see them open the gifts. You can't. You just make the choice and live with it. I tasted my soup. It was good rich broth, tender turkey vegetables cut precisely. Gordon had honored my $1,000, best table, best service, best attention to detail, even if my son and his wife would never know what it cost me. The dining room hummed with Christmas Eve energy families, celebrating couples leaning close over candlelight, the soft clink of silverware against china. Dean Martin had given way to Nat King Cole chestnuts and open fires. I saw Gordon moving through the room, stopping at tables with practiced ease. He checked on a family near the Christmas tree, smiled at something a woman said, adjusted a wine bottle in its bucket. Then he turned toward our table. His path was deliberate. I watched him navigate between servers and patrons, his eyes finding mine before he'd crossed half the dining room. He stopped at our table, hands clasped behind his back. "How is everything this evening? Can I get you anything else?" "We're good," Desmond said without looking up. He was scrolling through his phone, lamb chops half finished. Celeste swallowed another bite of Wagyu. "This is divine. Compliments to the chef." Gordon nodded, but his eyes stayed on me. "Sir, everything's perfect," I said. "Thank you." Our eyes held for a moment longer than necessary. Something passed between us. Acknowledgement, understanding, recognition that didn't need words. He'd seen the envelope I'd given him earlier. He'd seen my hands when I'd handed it over the steady fingers of a man who'd spent 43 years calculating load-bearing tolerances. He'd recognized something in those hands, not just engineer's precision, but purpose. His gaze lingered there now on my weathered hands, wrapped around the soup spoon, the gold wedding band I still wore 12 years after Lillian's death, the calluses from decades of drafting work. Then his eyes lifted to my vest, the navy, one Lillian had bought the brass buttons catching candlelight, and something shifted in his expression. Not pity, respect. He nodded once, subtle, deliberate. Neither Desmond nor Celeste noticed. Desmond was typing something urgent, jaw tight. Celeste was photographing her Wagyu from 3 angles, probably for Instagram. Gordon moved on to the next table, his hand briefly touching the back of my chair as he passed. A gesture of solidarity so small, it might have been accidental, but I knew it wasn't. I set down my spoon and reached inside my vest fingers, finding the envelope's sharp corners through the fabric. Not the money envelope that was already spent, already doing its work in Gordon's safe. This envelope held something more valuable. Documents, screenshots, proof, evidence of every lie my son had told, every dollar he'd stolen, every promise he'd broken. Patience. Engineers pour concrete in layers, let each cure before adding the next. Rush the foundation and the whole structure fails. I'd been patient for 21 days. Since the moment I'd seen my house listed on Zillow, photographed from inside my own fence, scheduled to close tomorrow morning while I was supposed to be distracted by this dinner. I could be patient a little longer. Across from me, Desmond was typing something urgent, his face pale in the candlelight. His earlier phone call, the one about tomorrow morning's closing, had left him shaken. Whatever was happening, it wasn't going smoothly. Good. Celeste's fingers drummed against the white tablecloth. Nervous rhythm making Lillian's stolen watch slide down her wrist with each tap. The tiny triangular scratch caught the light. I touched the envelope again through the vest fabric, feeling the weight of 20 years of betrayal compressed into paper and ink. Soon, I thought, very soon, the waiter appeared to clear our main course plates. My soup bowl was empty. Celeste's Wagyu was gone, the cast iron scraped clean. Desmond had barely touched his lamb chops. Dessert menu, the waiter asked. Celeste smiled. Absolutely, we're celebrating. I looked at my son, at his wife, at the watch on her wrist. Yes, I said quietly, we are. Desmond reached into his jacket and pulled out a red envelope with gold edges, sliding it across the white tablecloth toward me, with a smile I'd seen him use at business dinners, warm, calculated, empty. We got you something, Dad, he said. For Christmas, open it. The envelope felt expensive between my fingers. Heavy cardstock, embossed gold pattern along the edges. I opened it carefully. Inside a card with generic gold lettering, seasons, greetings, and a glossy brochure. Full-color photographs of smiling seniors in a sunlit lobby playing chess, doing yoga on a terrace overlooking mountains. Pines, Senior Living, Colorado Springs. I unfolded the brochure. More photos. Spacious apartments with kitchenettes and walk-in showers. Dining room with white tablecloths and fresh flowers. Activities calendar, bingo, gardening club, movie nights, weekly excursions. A price sheet was tucked inside, printed on separate paper. 2-bedroom suite, $4,800 per month. Premium suite with mountain view, $6,200. I looked up. Desmond was watching me with that same practiced smile. Celeste had her phone out, but was glancing over, waiting for my reaction. Pines is very highly rated, Celeste said, her voice honey-sweet. We thought you might want to explore your options, downsize, simplify. Start fresh, somewhere with support. Support. The word landed like a stone. I ran my thumb along the edge of the brochure. The corners were worn. Not fresh printed worn, studied worn. The fold lines were soft from being opened and closed multiple times. This wasn't a Christmas morning idea. This was research. This is very thoughtful, I said, keeping my voice level. How long have you been researching this? Desmond's smile didn't waver. A few months. We wanted to find the right place. Somewhere you'd be comfortable, safe. Safe, comfortable, support. Words that sounded like care but meant warehousing. I did the math automatically. $890,000 for my house, the one they were selling tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. $4,800 a month for assisted living. That's 185 months, 15 years of rent. I'd be dead long before the math stopped working in their favor. and whatever remained would go back to them. Every cent. While I spent my final years in a 2-bedroom suite, eating institutional meals and playing bingo with strangers, they'd be in Aspen and the Maldives wearing my wife's stolen watch. The waiting list is usually 6 months, Celeste added, but we know someone on the board. We could probably get you in by February. February. Right after their Maldives vacation. Right after the Bentley arrived. Right after they'd closed on selling my house and pocketed the money. I folded the brochure slowly, precisely, and slipped it into my vest pocket. I'll think about it. Of course, Desmond said. No pressure, just wanted you to know you have options. Options, as if I had any. Desmond's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, face tightening the way it had during the earlier call. Sorry, I need to check this. Be right back. He stood and walked quickly toward the lobby phone already at his ear. And then it was just Celeste and me. Silence settled over the table the first time we'd been alone all night. She adjusted Lillian's watch on her wrist, then picked up her water glass, set it down without drinking. Her gaze drifted across the dining room to a table near the Christmas tree. Large family, 3 generations, grandmother at the head, surrounded by children and grandchildren. Laughter, presents being exchanged, someone taking photos. Belonging. Something crossed Celeste's face. Not pity. Something else. Longing, maybe, or regret. Before I reveal what she said next, are you still with me? Comment A, if you think Celeste has any real regret, or B, if this is all performance, and tell me in 1 sentence why you chose that. Quick note. What follows includes some recreated dialogue to capture the emotional core of this moment. The lesson is what matters. Do you ever wonder, she said quietly, still looking at the other table, what things would have been like if differently? For 3 seconds, I saw the woman she might have been before debt, and Instagram, and $4 million villas turned her into this. Someone who'd made different choices. Someone who'd chosen family over status. Then it was gone. Every day, I said. She looked at me, and something flickered in her eyes, recognition, maybe, that we were both sitting at a table we'd built ourselves for, better or worse. Then Desmond returned. He slid into his seat, face pale, jaw tight. He leaned close to Celeste and whispered, but the dining room acoustics carried sound in strange ways, and our corner table amplified it just enough. Everything's set for tomorrow, Sterling confirmed. 9 a.m. sharp. Celeste nodded once. Brief, businesslike. Sterling. Brad Sterling, the real estate agent I'd met at Desmond's office party in August. The one whose name was on the Zillow listing. The one who'd trespassed in my backyard to photograph my property. 9 a.m. sharp, Christmas morning, tomorrow. I heard every word. Desmond straightened, picked up his champagne flute, drained what was left. His hands were shaking slightly. Whatever was happening with the closing, it wasn't going as smoothly as he'd hoped. Good. The trap was built. The foundation was solid. All I needed now was the trigger. Across the dining room, I saw the waiter approaching another table with a black leather billfolder. He set it down, smiled, walked away. The couple at the table reached for it together, laughing about something. Our waiter would be here soon, any minute now. And when that billfolder arrived, when Celeste or Desmond reached for it, expecting me to fumble and apologize, and admit I couldn't afford this dinner, that's when everything would break open. I folded my hands on the table and waited. Patience. Engineers don't rush the pour. They wait for the right moment, the right conditions, the perfect alignment of load and stress and structural integrity. And then they let physics do the rest. More coffee? Our waiter asked, appearing at my elbow. No, thank you, I said. I think we're about ready for the check. Desmond looked up sharply. Celeste's fingers stopped drumming. Of course, the waiter said. I'll bring that right out. I looked at my son, at his wife, at the watch on her wrist. Not long now, I thought. Not long at all. The black leather folder landed on our table at exactly 10:30, and I watched Celeste's hand move toward it, like a snake striking already, knowing what she was about to do, because I'd spent 3 weeks preparing for this exact moment. Tyler, our waiter, mid-20s, nervous hands, crisp white shirt that had somehow stayed pristine through the entire Christmas Eve rush, set the folder down precisely between the salt shaker and Celeste's wine glass. He smiled politely, professionally, and started to step back. Celeste opened the folder before he could retreat. I watched her eyes scan the itemized list. Wagyu ribeye, $220. Lamb chops, $85. Lobster bisque, $42. Bollinger Grande Année Champagne, $195. Dessert tasting menu, $70 per person. 2 appetizers. 3 cocktails Desmond had ordered while I was in the restroom earlier. Total at the bottom, printed in bold, $687.34, plus suggested gratuity. Celeste looked up at Tyler. Then she looked at me. Something cold settled into her expression, not anger exactly, calculation. She raised her voice, not shouting but loud enough, projecting, the way someone speaks when they want to be overheard. Separate checks, please. She gestured to herself and Desmond with one manicured hand. One for us. Then she pointed directly at me, her finger extended like she was identifying a stranger. One for him. We're not paying for him. The table to our left went silent mid-conversation. A couple in their 60s, both holding forks frozen halfway to their mouths. Him, not Dad, not Warren. Him, like I was an object, a problem, something to be identified and separated from the people who mattered. Tyler's face went pale. Ma'am, I'll need to check with my manager about splitting a bill this late. Then check, Celeste said, setting the folder down with a sharp tap against the tablecloth. We're happy to wait. I looked at Desmond. He was staring down at his lap, jaw-tight phone clutched in one hand. The light from the screen cast his face in blue shadows. 3 full seconds passed. He could have said something, could have objected, could have told his wife that this was his father, that he'd invited me to dinner, that this was Christmas Eve. He said nothing. The silence stretched. Nearby conversations had stopped. I could feel eyes turning toward us, the weight of attention from strangers who'd been enjoying their holiday meals and were now witnessing something they hadn't expected. I stood up slowly. My chair scraped against the floor, the sound sharp and final in the quiet. Thank you, I said. Celeste's eyes narrowed, confused. Desmond's head came up slightly still, not meeting my gaze. I said thank you, and I didn't know why. Maybe because I finally had the answer to a question I'd been asking for. 20 years. Would my son choose his mother's memory or money? He'd chosen? Tyler stood frozen bill folder still in his hand, looking between me and Celeste like a man caught in crossfire he didn't understand. Then Gordon Whitfield stepped out from near the bar. He walked directly to our table, not hurrying, but purposeful, his posture straight, his face composed. Every inch the professional manager, but something else, too. Something deliberate. He stopped beside Tyler, one hand briefly touching the young waiter's shoulder, a gesture of reassurance. Then he spoke, clearly, projecting the way trained servers do when they want an entire section to hear the specials. I'm sorry there's no separate check to process. Mr. Prescott settled the entire bill at 5:30 this afternoon, in full. Celeste's eyes went wide, color drained from her face, shock, registering in the sudden slackness of her jaw, the way her hand flew to her throat. Desmond's head snapped up from his phone. First real eye contact in an hour. Pure shock. What Celeste's voice came out sharp, disbelieving. Gordon's expression remained neutral, professional. The bill was paid in advance, gratuity included. There's nothing owed. Desmond stared at me. Dad, what? I knew you'd do exactly this, I said. My voice cut through the restaurant's silence like a blade through water. I've known for a long time what you'd become. I reached into my vest. Fingers found the envelope's edge, not the Pines brochure they'd given me, the other one. The one I'd been carrying for 3 weeks. Manila folder. Old. Worn edges from being opened and reviewed and checked dozens of times. I pulled it out slowly, deliberately letting them see it. Desmond's face went from shock to something else. Recognition, maybe. Fear. I set the envelope on the white tablecloth between the salt shaker and Celeste's wine glass. The same spot where Tyler had set the bill folder 90 seconds ago. Dad, Desmond's voice was barely a whisper. I don't understand. Yes, you do, I said. Around us, the restaurant section had gone quiet. Not the polite quiet of people minding their business, but the breathless quiet of witnesses to something they'd tell their families about for years. Silverware no longer clinked. Conversations had died mid-sentence. I could see phones coming out at nearby tables, not obviously, but there. Held low cameras pointed in our direction. Celeste was staring at the envelope like it was a bomb. Desmond's hands had started shaking. The phone slipped from his grip, clattered against his plate. Gordon stood perfectly still, his face neutral, but his eyes meeting mine with that same recognition I'd seen earlier. Understanding. Respect. I paid for this dinner 3 hours ago. I said, my voice steady, calm, the same tone I'd used for 43 years when presenting structural calculations to clients who didn't want to hear that their building design wouldn't hold. I paid with the last money I had, because I knew that when the bill came, you'd do exactly what you just did. Celeste opened her mouth, closed it. No words came out. I repeated, because I've been watching you for a long time. Longer than you think. I sat back down. Not because they asked me to, not because the moment was over, but because this wasn't a moment to stand tall. It was a moment to lay evidence on a table, like an engineer presenting blueprints. The envelope sat between us on the white linen, edges worn soft from handling, containing 20 years of documentation. Proof. Desmond stared at it like it might explode. Around us, at least 50 people had stopped eating, stopped talking. Phones raised some openly now, recording. Christmas lights twinkled on the tree across the dining room. Nat King Cole sang about peace on earth through the sound system. I touched the envelope's corner with one finger, and I thought now. I opened the envelope, the same one I had carried in my vest pocket all night, the same one I had been preparing for 3 weeks, and pulled out the first document. The paper made a soft sound against the manila folder. I laid it flat on the white tablecloth, smoothing it with my palm. Bank transfer deed, July 2005. Sale proceeds from Prescott Consulting, transferred in full to Desmond Arthur Prescott. The amount highlighted in yellow, $3,500,000. Do you remember this, Desmond? My voice was calm. Summer of 2005. Every cent your mother and I had from selling my firm. You promised you'd make us proud. He stared at the paper like it was written in a language he didn't recognize. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. I pulled out the second document. A medical invoice from Denver Health. $12,347. Status sent to collections. Then a third, Oncology Associates of Colorado, $8,921. Then a fourth, a fifth, a sixth. 6 invoices laid side by side across the white tablecloth, like a ledger of everything that had gone wrong. $47,000, I said. Medical bills I couldn't pay. I placed down the next sheet. Official letterhead, Dr. Helen Brennan, Thoracic Oncology, September of this year. Stage 2 prostate cancer. Treatable, but the out-of-pocket cost after Medicare came to $34,000. Celeste's hand moved to her throat. And I chose to keep paying property taxes instead of getting treatment, I said. I chose the house where your mother died over my own life, because losing that house meant losing the last place where she still existed. Desmond's face had gone from pale to gray. More documents followed. 3 years of property tax delinquency notices stamped overdue in red. Pharmacy receipts for generic medications because I couldn't afford the difference in copays. Each page laid down with the quiet precision of a man who had spent 40 years building things that had to be exact. Then I pulled out the screenshot. A full-color printout. A Zillow listing. My address, the house Lillian and I had bought together in 1978. The photograph showed my own backyard taken from inside the property line. Listed at $890,000. Listing agent Brad Sterling, Prescott and Vale Properties. Scheduled closing December the 25th, 9 o'clock in the morning. I found this 3 weeks ago, I said. December 3rd. I was looking up property tax information and found my own house for sale. I looked up and met his eyes. That's why you invited me to dinner tonight. Not because you wanted to see me. You invited me so I wouldn't be home tomorrow morning when you closed on selling my house out from under me. Dad, I can explain. Can you... I asked. Can you explain how you listed my house without my signature? Can you explain why the closing is scheduled for 9 a.m. on Christmas morning? Silence. Around us, the entire restaurant had gone still. Not a fork moving, not a glass lifted. 50 phones held high, recording everything. The math is simple, I said. Sell my house for $890,000. Put me in Pines Senior Living at $4,800 a month. I'm 72 with untreated cancer. You're betting I'll be dead in 10 years. Whatever's left returns to you. Clean legal, no contest. I turned to Celeste. I pointed at her wrist. That watch, I said quietly. Do you see the triangular scratch on the crystal bottom left corner? Her hand instinctively moved to cover it. Your mother got that scratch in 1998, I said to Desmond, catching it on a car door handle outside a grocery store. The jeweler said it wasn't worth repairing. She laughed and said it gave the watch character. She wore it every single day for 31 years until the cancer took her. His hands were shaking now, visible tremors. When she died, you told me it was lost during one of her hospital stays. You looked me in the eye at her funeral and said it was gone. I wanted to bury her with it. I leaned forward. You lied. Celeste stared at the watch as though it had burned her skin. I gave you everything, I said. My voice didn't need to be loud. The room was already silent. Every cent, every year of my life, every ounce of faith I had. And you sold it all. You sold your mother's watch. You sold my house. You sold my future. The documents lay spread across the white tablecloth like an autopsy, 20 years of trust, dissected into numbers, dates, and lies. The restaurant had stopped being a restaurant. It had become a courtroom, and I had just rested my case. I stood one last time, not to confront my son, but to speak to everyone else. The families at nearby tables, the elderly couples holding hands, the children who had watched this unfold. What I had to say was no longer just about Desmond. The restaurant was silent. 50 people waiting. I turned slightly, addressing the room. Christmas isn't about expensive dinners, I said. My voice carried in the silence, not loud, but clear the way sound travels when everyone has stopped breathing. It's not about designer watches or $4 million vacation homes. It's about remembering who sacrificed everything so you could have yours. Faces at nearby tables came into focus. An older woman with silver hair and tears on her cheeks. A middle-aged man holding his daughter's hand. A couple in their 60s who had stopped mid-meal an hour ago and never resumed. It's about honoring that sacrifice, I continued. Not selling it, not treating it like a transaction to be optimized, or a burden to be warehoused. I turned back to Desmond. He was staring at the table at the scattered documents, at 20 years of evidence laid out between us. Your mother believed in you until the day she died, I said quietly. She never got to find out she was wrong, and I'm glad she didn't live long enough to see what you became. His face crumpled. Both hands came up to cover his eyes, shoulders shaking with full, heavy sobs, the kind that come from somewhere locked away for years. Dad, please, his voice broke. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I looked at him for a long moment. My son, 45 years old, crying like a child who had finally understood what he'd lost. Then a man near the Christmas tree, late 50s, gray, beard flannel shirt, stood and began clapping. Slow and deliberate. The woman beside him rose, then the couple at the next table, then another and another, until the entire room was standing applause, filling the dining room and echoing off the high ceilings. I didn't acknowledge it. This had never been about me. I buttoned my coat slowly, the navy vest, Lillian's vest, still underneath brass buttons, catching candlelight one final time. Then I walked toward the exit without looking back. Gordon Whitfield was waiting in the hallway. He held out the envelope, the one with $1,000, the one I'd given him that afternoon. Tonight is on the house, he said. And even if it wasn't you saved my daughter's life 30 years ago. He pulled a folded newspaper clipping from his jacket, yellowed at the edges. December 1995. Glenwood Canyon. A black and white photograph of a bridge, my bridge. The I-70 crossing through Glenwood Canyon I designed in 1994, still standing while floodwater raged beneath it. Every bridge on Route 70 washed out, except yours. Gordon said, his voice thick. My daughter was 8 years old on a school bus crossing home from a field trip. Your bridge held. 37 children made it across safely while the water took everything else within an hour. He looked at me, eyes wet. She's 38 now, has 2 children of her own, because of you. Because you built something that held when everything else gave way. I stared at that photograph. A younger version of me, hard hat in hand, standing before something I had calculated and tested and poured my entire career into something I had forgotten, buried under property, taxes, and medical bills, and the slow erosion of a life lived without the woman who believed in me most. I took the envelope, took the clipping too, folded it carefully and tucked it inside. I had come tonight to expose betrayal. I was leaving with proof that something I built 30 years ago still mattered. The cold hit my face the moment I stepped outside, sharp, clean, honest. It was the first honest thing I'd felt all night until I'd stood up inside and told the truth. Snow was falling harder now. Fat flakes drifted through parking lot lights, settling on windshields and pavement. The lot was nearly empty. A white Porsche, pulled away Desmond's probably. Expensive cars carrying expensive people home. I looked for my truck out of habit, then remembered. November, $8,400. Torres the mechanic. No more truck. I started walking, 2 blocks to the bus stop. My footsteps crunched in fresh snow. The navy vest, Lillian's vest, collected white powder on the shoulders. Somewhere distant church bells rang 11 times. Christmas Eve quiet had settled over everything. I brushed snow from the bench and sat down. Route 15, last run of the night. 10 minutes. I touched the envelope through the vest fabric. $1,000 given away this afternoon, returned tonight. And inside it, a newspaper clipping from December 1995. A bridge. A younger version of me. Proof that something I'd built had mattered. I thought about Lillian. She would have been proud that I spoke the truth tonight, and sad that I'd had to. She'd believed in Desmond more than I ever did. She'd signed those papers in 2005 with complete faith, her hand resting on mine. She never got to find out she was wrong. Maybe that was a mercy. Snow fell steadily. My fingers were getting cold, but I didn't mind. Cold was honest. Cold was real. The bus arrived with a hydraulic hiss. Warm air spilled out. The driver, an older woman with silver hair, looked at me, taking in the snow-dusted vest and the tired eyes. "Merry Christmas, sir," she said. "Rough night." I climbed the steps and met her eyes. "No," I said. "Tonight was necessary." She nodded like she understood something I hadn't said. The bus was nearly empty. A nurse in scrubs sat near the middle. An older man in work boots dozed near the back. I took a window seat on the right side, the same seat I'd sat in 3 hours ago. Same route, maybe the same driver. But I wasn't the same. I'd arrived at that restaurant as a victim setting a trap. I was leaving as a man who had reclaimed something lost, years ago. Not money, not family legacy, but something simpler, the ability to look at myself without shame. Under the reading light, I unfolded the newspaper clipping. There I was, early 40s, hard hat in hand, standing before a bridge that would save Gordon's daughter 3 months later. Standing before a proof that engineering wasn't about the engineer. It was about building things that held when everything else gave way. That bridge saved a child I never met in 1995. 30 years later, it saved me. When the bus reached my street, I pulled the cord. I thanked the driver. She told me to get home safe. I stepped down into the snow and stood in front of my house, dark, cold, waiting. I touched Lillian's vest one final time. Some things aren't measured in money. I was still here. For now, that was everything. And to you listening to my story, remember, this family isn't just about blood. Looking back, I wonder if I should have held on to some of that money in 2005. But Lillian believed in our son, and I believed in her. My mistake wasn't giving everything, it was not protecting myself when I saw the signs. Don't make my mistake. Don't wait until you're 72 with untreated cancer to realize that some people see love as weakness. Sometimes being a revenge dad isn't about anger. It's about refusing to disappear quietly when your own children treat you like an obstacle. Family justice doesn't always look like courtroom victories. Sometimes it's just speaking truth in front of 50 witnesses and walking away with your dignity intact. I believe God put me through this to stand up, not just for myself, but for every parent who's been made invisible by the people they sacrificed everything for. That bridge I built in 1995 saved a child I never met, and 30 years later, it saved me too. Real family justice isn't about revenge, it's about truth. And being a revenge dad in the right way means choosing dignity over destruction. If this story moved you, I'd be grateful if you'd share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below. Do you think I handled this the right way, or should I have confronted them differently? And if you believe in standing up with dignity, please subscribe to Silent Dad Revenge. Your support means the world to me. Thank you for staying until the very end. This story contains fictionalized elements added for storytelling and reflection, but the message about dignity and standing up for yourself is very real.